Good morning, it's Monday. Привет.
Привет.
Today, let's talk a little bit, now that we have our time frame, we can go into Soviet times. This is one of my favorite topics, and we will try to look at this with an unbiased approach. Good things happened, bad things happened. It was definitely exciting times. So what date are we in our generalized, very generalized time frame should we give? Right around what date?
1917.
Yeah, 1917, you have the revolution. Okay, so the revolution was caused by, and we had some good terms came out today. Who caused the revolution? The people, proletariat, and it was against the bourgeoisie, the overthrow of the aristocracy, the white Russian monarchy, and I believe it was Tsar Nicholas, the second in at that time. People were murdered, the overthrow occurred, but there were very exciting times. So let's look a little bit at what the Soviet Union framework looked like and what were the main objectives. So what did we say the main objectives were of the Soviet framework?
Accelerating industrialization, collectivizing.
Yes, industrialization, increasing industrialization, and collectivizing agriculture. So what was the philosophy that was behind this Soviet framework? Marxism, Karl Marx philosophy, which really was a utopian philosophy. So this utopian philosophy said, hey, we see that very few people own the land and all the rest of the people are working the land without any hope of changing their status in life and really don't own anything. And so let's change it to make it fair. Let's say the people, everybody owns a little piece, an equal piece of the pie, of the total, and that this is this is the way society should be, that people should all work together for the common good, and everything should be owned by all of us. But actually putting it into place isn't so easy. We do have different countries of the world today that are in various states of communism and various types of communism. So this isn't the first or last time this has happened. But we do know it did fail. And what was the date that the USSR collapsed?
December 25.
1991. And 1991, at the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was bittersweet. It was good and it was bad too, because economically the places that were in the Soviet Union fell into disarray. Okay, so let's look at that a little bit. Collectivizing agriculture, let's start there. Was that a success? No, it wasn't a success. And remember, the USSR really needed farmland, really needed to feed its people. Russia needed that because you can see so much of Russia is cold, and we have the Ural Mountains blocking the warm air that comes in. And so those lands took in a lot of ethnic minorities, and these ethnic minorities were there at the time of the revolution. And so collectivizing agriculture, or people living on a kibbutz, were families that had owned land and now were forced to both manufacture and farm on the lands all together in kibbutzes. So places like the Ukraine, it really wasn't such a good thing for them. And remember, where were the Slavs from originally?
Ukraine.
Kyiv, Ukraine. Yeah, so there's a lot of ownership feeling of Russia for the Ukraine. So people were exiled, and even though Ukrainian farmers had supplied so much food to the USSR, to the people of Russia, remember everything goes back to Command Central, it's a command economy, so that food goes back to Russia. The Soviet framework was such that people were punished if they didn't obey. And it was a command system. And that meant that if they didn't obey, they were punished. So a lot of Ukrainians starved to death. A lot were exiled, froze to death, being marched to Siberia. So there was really hard times. So what about the other system, the manufacturing? Was that one successful?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Manufacturing, in fact, we already talked about World War II, and the Soviets effectively subdued the Germans that way by cranking out all kinds of items for the war that were very much needed, just quietly and without being attacked, because it's quite safe, there, where the manufacturing was occurring. Also, education, quite successful. And the system of education, of feeding, of housing, and we did talk about housing. Soviet housing, very tiny for often extended families, but it was free. Education, it was free. Food, people would get their food. Some jobs were to work in the soup kitchen, and then you would go and soup and food all there, some kind of stew, some kind of bread, something hearty and filling. And yet there was almost no items in the stores. People were given clothing. It was just pretty drab, pretty brown, regular clothing. Everybody wore pretty much the same thing, and yet there were no choices. And so this is where the collapse came in. People weren't really paid. They couldn't really live where they wanted to. And then think of all these, a lot of times, what is left out is how many ethnicities there are and how many ethnic people live in Russia today and how many were there during Soviet times. So when this Soviet framework came about, and again this is around 1917, 1918, 1920, where it was actually signed, there was a treaty, and not all of these ethnic groups that were taken over during the times of the czars really wanted to be part of the USSR. So how many SSRs, or Soviet Socialist Republics, are there at this time?
15.
15. And there was one group from the Caucasus that really refused to sign. This was the Chechens. Chechnya, Ingushetia, what's known as Ingushetia now, and Chechnya. Actually, Ingushetia did go ahead and sign. The Chechens did not want to sign. They were forced into this union.